Welcome to SARC Talk. SARC is a nonprofit cancer research organization that develops and manages clinical research trials in pediatric and adult sarcomas. SARC Talk is a podcast to discuss activities of SARC, interview sarcoma research leaders, and review scientific initiatives in the sarcoma field.
My name is Christina Iptoma, and I am mom to OsteoAngel Dylan and Director of Scientific Programs at MIB Agents. And today on OsteoBytes, we're excited to have a conversation with Dr. Scott Acuno, Chief Medical Officer at SARC, and also Ann Graham, our Executive Director of MIB Agents. And thank you, everyone, for joining today. Thank you, Ann and Dr. Acuno. We're thrilled to have you both. A little bit more about our guest today. Dr. Acuno is a professor of oncology at the Mayo Clinic in Rochester, Minnesota. He's a recognized expert in sarcoma and clinical research. Dr. Acuno has been the SARC medical officer since 2012, and in this role, he provides medical oversight to the day-to-day activities of the SARC clinical trials. Dr. Acuno regularly interacts with the SARC research project management team and the study principal investigators to ensure proper study conduct, quality data, and the overall safety for all SARC clinical trials. Dr. Acuno was appointed SARC Chief Medical Officer in September 2022 and joined the SARC Board of Directors in October 2022. And Ann is not only our Executive Director and founder of MIB Agents, but she's also an osteo warrior. She was diagnosed in 2010 at age 43 while training for a marathon. And she was treated in the Pediatric Cancer Center at Memorial Sloan Kettering in New York City, where she was surrounded by kids who awed and inspired her with their courage and positive attitude. And since she completed treatment, her mission has been to make it better for children battling osteosarcoma. The start of MIB was in 2012 with the end-of-life mission for illicit divers, one of Ann's fellow patients at MSKCC in the Pediatric Oncology Unit. And then MIB Agents officially became a 501c3 in 2016. So welcome, Dr. Acuno and Ann, and welcome everyone joining us today. Please feel free to add any of your questions for our guests to the Q&A. And before we get started, just some announcements and reminders. We have the Healing Hearts series for bereaved parents in a couple of weeks on August 16th at 7 p.m. Eastern. And then starting in September, there's going to be a new series of Healing Hearts for bereaved parents on Wednesdays and Saturdays, and those run through the end of the year. And then we're also offering different sessions for young adult siblings and another separate session for teen siblings. So I'll put some info in the chat on how to sign up and get more information about those. And we're gearing up for Childhood Cancer Awareness Month, which is September. And so with a $25 donation, you'll receive a beautiful big gold bow that you can adorn your mailbox or front door with. And these are similar bows to last year, so you can refresh your bow. And based on the weather that we had last year, I can attest to the fact that they are highly weather resistant and they will look beautiful on your mailbox all year long. And so when you donate and purchase a bow, those proceeds will support programs, education, and research for the osteosarcoma community. All right, so our format today is a little bit different. We don't have a formal presentation or anything, just a conversation, which I'm really looking forward to. Our guest today, Dr. Scott Acuno, is no stranger to podcasts because he hosts the monthly podcast SARC Talk, which explores all things related to sarcoma, including interviews with the sarcoma researchers, discussions of innovative scientific initiatives in the field of sarcoma, and updates on the activities of SARC. So thanks so much again for joining us. And I thought maybe to just kick us off, each of you could provide just a quick overview of each of our organizations. I know a lot of people tuning in are already familiar with MIB Agents, but I know that we're also going to be sharing this with a SARC audience who may not be as familiar. So maybe Dr. Acuno, could you kick us off with an overview of SARC?
No, I appreciate it. Thank you, Christina. Thanks for MIB for the opportunity to be with Ann and discuss a little bit about what SARC is and what we do as an organization. So SARC started 20 years ago. And the main thing at that time was we wanted to do clinical trials that was overseen by sarcoma experts, trial designs that were sarcoma experts, and that's how we all started. Back in the day, most of the sarcoma trials were done with cooperative groups, for which we had to nudge our way in to get sarcoma trials. And more importantly, some of the reviewers didn't know anything about sarcoma. So it was very hard to get a footprint and move forward. So that's how we originally developed. So a good component of what we do is do clinical trials that are designed and developed with sarcoma experts. And most of our trials are in the United States, but we do collaborative studies across the United States, Australia, and Europe. So it's been a great 20-year plus run. In addition, we do have highlighting some components that if we really want to move forward with sarcoma, we need some basic science, and we need the scientific community to understand what we're doing and focus our attention on sarcoma. Out of that, we've developed what we will call the scientific steering group that really supports the basic science aspect. And that basic science aspect is led by Jonathan Fletcher, who is our chief scientific officer, and he helps direct the basic science and translational work at SARC for us. So that's a big effort, and that's been continuing to grow, and there's a lot of fun stuff, and we can maybe share later on what we're planning on doing actually this year as well. We also realized pretty quickly that if we want sarcoma scientists, sarcoma investigators, we need to develop a career path for them. We needed a mentorship program for them. We also needed ability to help support their research, like funding a little bit. So then we did develop the Career Development Award. So that's what we built out. And some of our greatest successes actually in memories have been awarding Career Development Award to scientists that wanted to spend their career doing sarcoma. And many of them, and most of them, are still actively involved in sarcoma and building out the future for what we're doing. Probably in the last 5 to 10 years, we started to realize too that the sarcoma community is not just scientists, not just industry, not just basic laboratory, but also patient advocacy groups. So around that space, we started to develop what we would call the Research Advocacy Council, which is the group of individuals and other groups are part of that as well, to say is how do we engage with the community-based programs and not only the what we'd say pan-sarcoma groups, I mean, they help support anybody with sarcoma, but also the histology specific. So we're continuing to build that portfolio out. So what we would typically say is we're all things sarcoma, and we're trying to get all those people interested in sarcoma to be part of our group and to move forward to ultimately help our patients with sarcoma.
Fantastic. And Anne, do you want to just give us a brief overview of MIB?
So MIB Agents makes it better. MIB for kids with osteosarcoma. We are laser beam focused on osteosarcoma. We make it better in 3 ways. And before I tell you the 3 ways, here's what we have in common with SARC. Everybody everybody is a part of each thing that we do. And that all by itself makes it better, that we have a community that's ingrained in each component of what MIB Agents does. So our 3 pillars are education. This is education for the entire community. So this will include things like the book on osteosarcoma, which is called Osteosarcoma From Our Families to Yours. It is distributed by institutions everywhere and is also available for free download on our website, as well as a hard copy, also for free. We'll send it to anybody who needs it. It's been translated into Spanish, and clearly English, and also Chinese, Mandarin specifically. And what I like to say is that MIB is like David Hasselhoff being big in Germany. We're big in China. In China, if you are diagnosed with osteosarcoma, you automatically get a copy of our book. We would love this for this to be the case in the U.S., where everybody who is diagnosed actually gets a book that helps them become a more educated patient, because we think they have the best outcome if you really understand your disease and what comes next. So let's see. Education also includes things like our testing and research directory. If you have a surgery coming up, like you often do when you have osteosarcoma, we have a guide that will help you know what to do with that tumor. It's broken up into two parts. One is to help inform research, and the other is to help inform a personal treatment plan. And mad props to Christina, who championed the testing and research directory, along with Richard Gorlick, Corey Painter, and a bunch of other, Katie Janeway. There are a lot of great clinicians and researchers involved in that project. And that is a living document. It's updated regularly. Lots more to tell you about education, but I'll move on to research. We fund osteosarcoma-specific research in a, like we do everything else, in a community way. It again, this is something that falls under under our director of scientific programs, Christina Iptoma. She manages the whole process. We get the proposals in. They're reviewed by our scientific advisory board. They're then reviewed by 88 different peer reviewers, and then also has a stakeholder review. So all parties really get involved in this process. And then additionally, what kind of separates us from other processes is our process doesn't stop when we fund the research. We actually go to the institution. We get to look in the microscope. We get to talk about what's happening in that research, and then and then they present it factor. So once we funded research, you can't shake us. We're in each other's lives after that. And then we have also patient-facing programs that will take you from diagnosis all the way through to survivor support, and even bereavement support for parents, and now brand new breaking news for siblings as well, age 13 and over, and lots of things in between. We do this with the help of our fantastic family funds who help us fund research. We do this with the help of our junior advisory board, this is a brilliant panel of patients, survivors, and siblings of those who have had osteosarcoma. They help us inform internally and externally the entire organization, and even pharma companies. So did I miss anything? I think that about sums us up.
Thank you. So I know one of the things that both our organizations really emphasize and encourage is collaboration in the scientific community. Dr. Kuno, I know SARC's mission is to drive high-impact, centrally supported collaborations. But likewise, it's really important for foundations and patient advocates to work together. And I know you talked a little about having a research advocacy council and kind of reaching out to pan-sarcoma groups and trying to work with more disease-specific groups. But Anne, I know you're also on the board of SARC, and so can you maybe talk a little bit about your experience there?
Yeah, really. I'll tell you my beginning of engaging with SARC is going to the ASCO meeting in Chicago right before the pandemic. I think 2019. I went and as MIB went to the ASCO's American Society of Clinical Oncology, went to the SARC meeting at ASCO. And I went, oh my gosh, these are all of our people. Like these, I'm seeing all of the doctors that we communicate with regularly, some that, I know, but have never met, but I know who they are and I know what they're doing. And so I was really inspired and excited by seeing all of these sarcoma doctors who are all really working on such a difficult part of cancer. This is a really difficult disease to treat, whether it's osteosarcoma, leiomyosarcoma, Ewing sarcoma, it's all really hard stuff. And here they are all coming together. And I was just delighted to see everybody in one space, and so excited to see that everybody was getting together outside of, or in addition to, the ASCO meeting, where all of the cancers are represented by various clinicians and researchers. So that was the start. And then a board position became available, and I was interviewed for it, and I was in, and I remember talking with Dr. Jonathan Fletcher and Stephen Young, the executive director, president and CEO of SARC, and going, oh my gosh, this is such an amazing organization. And by the way, we've been in since I knew that it existed, because one of the most important things I think SARC does is points people in the direction of sarcoma centers. And while we do not give out medical advice at MIB Agents, one of the things we do say when somebody contacts us for the first time is get to a sarcoma center, even if it's just for a second opinion, even if it's just to ride shotgun on treatment, that you have a major sarcoma center, a major institution, high volume, helping guide your treatment, because this is a difficult disease to treat. So I love that they had that resource. I had lots of thoughts and ideas about how that could be expanded, how that could be engaged, that those centers could be engaged on a regular basis. So we talked about those things, and they were like, okay, like, stop, like, okay, you can join, like, because I was just like, I love this organization already, but I really felt like we could do more. And I also, as you and Dr. Okuno have both said, we are aligned at our core values of the only way through this. And Dr. Jonathan Fletcher says this regularly, Stephen Young says this regularly, and you've heard Dr. Okuno say it. Basically, none of us individually have everything we need to solve for X, which is sarcoma. We need each other to move this thing forward. And I really believe that the new day of osteosarcoma, which that new day is here and has been here for the last several years, I think, I think most everybody is on board. And if they're not on board yet, we're going to get them on board this train of, like, let's talk to each other and let's figure this thing out together. So now that I've been a board member for, I don't know, a year, I know this to be true, not just from the outside looking in, admiring the organization, but now from the inside as well, going, wow, everybody in this organization at SARC they do what they say they do. They do as they promise. And that promise is aligned with ours in that they're trying to make it better for sarcoma. And they're doing this in a very purposeful way with great vision. So I'm really delighted and proud to be a part of this organization, and really the best is yet to come.
It's funny, Anne, when you were talking about when you first went to ASCO and saw all these people that you had heard about, like Dr. Okuno, I don't know if you are aware of this or if other researchers and clinicians are aware of this, but like people in the patient community, it's almost like we're like fanning over these doctors, because, we're up all late at night researching as much as we can, right? Because we're just desperately just trying to find as much info. And so we always see the names that come up on these papers. And then when we actually, get to meet some of these people face to face, it's almost like we're meeting, like BTS or something like that. Or so just as an aside, I don't know if you know that, but like there's a little bit of weird, there's a lot of frustration, I think, in the community for kind of all the work that's being
100%. Yeah. Total. Or this after conference, like it was like a middle school dance at first, with like the boys on one side and the girls on the other, except it was like the patients on one side and the physicians and the clinicians on the other side. And it was like, oh my gosh, is that fill in the blank doctor? And do you think I could talk to him? And now the conference is like, oh great, so-and-so's going to be here. I can't wait to see him again. And I hope we get to sit with each other at dinner. And it's really, it is very much a fangirl or like fan person, because it's not just the girl, not just the women, but it's also the dads and the general community. But now we get to, and it is a respectful gratitude. Like we're not just fanning out, but we feel honored to work alongside you. And I think that's part of the new day of sarcoma, where patients are working alongside the people that we respect and need. So yeah, totally. It's so funny you say that.
We progressed beyond the middle school dance, which is good. So Dr. Macuno, so first of all, it's like awesome that you have people like Anne, and you have some other people from other disease-specific foundations on the board, and then you also have this amazing research advisory council, which is also comprised of a lot of people, patients, survivors, and people representing other foundations. So moving forward, can you maybe talk about kind of what the vision is for working with these disease-specific organizations? I mean, it's great that you're already incorporating, obviously, input and feedback from these various communities just within the structure of SARC, but just kind of ideas on moving forward, kind of the vision for interaction, and especially for some of the disease communities that haven't yet engaged with SARC, but would be interested to in the future.
No, that's good. And I'll just go back to our original name. The original name of our organization is SARC. Guess what? It's still SARC. And we rebranded, but originally it was Sarcoma Alliance through Research and Collaboration. So we started out as a small community because, as Anne said, we know that we don't know it all. And we knew from the very beginning, if we're going to solve major things, we had to work together. Now, other tumors, breast, lung, GI, you're probably fighting over each other because everybody has their own slice. But in our world, we know that we're collaborative. So from the very get-go, we realized we didn't know it all. We had to pull together resources. Because of that, we're quite blessed in our sarcoma community to have MIB. We'll pick on them today since this is part of it, because they have pulled together a scientific community. They have scientific advisors. They have patient engagement of only sarcomas of the bone, OGS. And we rely on that. We have other organizations such as the National Leiomyosarcoma Foundation, which focuses on LMS. They have a board, they have a scientific community, and they pull together researchers and fund things as well. There's also the EHE Foundation, putting that out there. They also have scientists that are focusing on EHE. They also have a board. They also fund research. So for sarcoma, and specifically SARC to come in and say, wow, we want that slice, the answer is no. You have organizations already that have that already. Why don't we partner, collaborate, and leverage their expertise, their ability to drive things, and where it makes sense, share that message as quick as possible, potentially help develop, co-develop clinical trial mechanisms for great ideas that come out of MIB, LMS, and I'm just picking a couple of them, EHE, where we can then say, using all of our sarcoma centers to address and get those studies out there quickly. So our vision is to work with, not supplant, not be, in the driver's seat, because, we're very blessed to have mature organizations. There are growing pains, I bet, too, and as you're going through MIB, but the reality is that they're at a very, very high level, and we need to leverage that. There are other, what we would call pan organizations. These are organizations that are not specifically there to support one histology, but they provide a wealth of patient support, navigational tools, counseling, etc., and reaching out and saying, what center should we go to? What do I expect? What should I expect when I go to a center? So those are organizations that we'll leverage too, because we want to get the word out that sarcoma centers are out there. They do a lot of tumors that are sarcoma-based, so we try to, share that out. So we support that. We as an organization don't want to start our own patient support group because we don't have access to patients per se. We don't have access to treating physicians other than their clinical trials. So again, it's a partnership. And to be honest, for all of us growing up in the sarcoma realm, even though Anne comes and fangirl, fanboy, whatever we're saying in that space, The reality is we're better physicians, we're better clinicians, we're better clinical trialists, we're better researchers if we understand what patients and families are going through and the concerns that they have. And that's the beauty of having Anne on the board as well, because the reality is she found a board that had her values. However, I can tell you, being at the meeting, we have taken her comments at the board and tried to operationalize a lot of what she says in the operations of SARC as well. So it's as we would say, a two-way street. And all of us, as you start to realize, are all approachable because we're all approachable. And sarcoma community physicians are very much like that.
Fantastic. And so one of the things you had mentioned was leveraging each other's strengths. So I know SARC is really focused on clinical trials, but SARC doesn't fund the trial. You act more like a study sponsor, a collaborating, coordinating center, and you have staff that can centrally manage those trials from kind of the three stages, right? Development, operations to close out. And so can you talk a little bit about how some of these SARC trials have come to fruition?
Yeah, so actually, well, there are multiple ways. Probably the best way that comes out is that we have sarcoma physicians, researchers, and trialists that have a great idea. They've done some preclinical work. They realize that a drug is good. They have an industry sponsor, but they don't have the resources to do a national study. So those are the vast majority of the studies, because in order for us to do a study, you need multiple centers across the United States to get people on study, appropriately conduct a study, and publish it and get that out there. So we're up to like 40 or 50 studies right now, at least in development, and this is how we do it. So it really comes from people that are engaged, boots on the ground, have an idea, sarcoma people that really want to push forward. Another realm is that we have a great partnership with industry, because they have a new drug, a new concept of the drug. They stumble on the fact that it might work in sarcoma, but they don't know the landscape of sarcoma. They don't know who the contacts need to be. And that's when they would come to SARC, partner with SARC, because then we can then help develop the study, help scientifically with the help of Jonathan Fletcher and this, the basic science group to build out a better science and appropriately design the trial a little bit better. And then the third and final one is that some of these are patient advocacy groups that have done through their own organization. They realize that, hey, to get to the next level, we need a little bit of support and collaboration through a cooperative group. And they don't want to navigate the standard cooperative groups through the government, the NCI, or they don't want to lose track of what's going on and get the ear of industry. So then they bring it to us, and then we can get the ear of industry and move those along. So it's really organically based. Sometimes it comes out of a lab with a great idea. We don't have a industry partner, but then we are working, say, well, who else has this drug? Who are we paying? So we're multiple connections and multiple conversation, knocking on the door, say, hey, we have some basic scientists that think your drug has there's a target that your company has. Can you, let's meet and work and co-develop. So those are usually the three ways that we will help develop a trial.
Okay, so it can really come from a physician or lab. It can come from a patient organization, and it can also come from industry. So really kind of any stakeholder really in the...
Again, we leverage everybody's strengths. Everybody comes with something at the table, and we're willing to listen, and we're willing to provide sarcoma expertise and the infrastructure to help run the trial.
And can you maybe talk about some past SARC trials for osteosarcoma or pediatric sarcoma?
Well, we just did one that we did, and this came from Laura Davis and other individuals, Leo Mascarenas and Dr. Naveed, had a great concept. We worked with industry to work on it. It probably has some activity, but it's a combination study, and we really couldn't prove that it is going to be something that we can move forward with, and we just have to retool that. But this is a study that was a national study led by both the PEDS group-ish and the AWA group, with a great concept specifically for osteogenic sarcoma, designed by sarcoma experts, run through SARC, and able to get it done very quickly and publish it. So, I mean, we're in the process of publishing it. So, but we've presented it in meetings and to see where we go. So that is a unique thing that we can do. And then we would love if you have MIB researchers that are working on things that has a drug says, hey, let's work through, collaborate with SARC to kind of develop the next study. We would love that.
So Christina can fill in the information on this, but we took that SARC 38 trial and funded Dr. Asgarzadeh to do a correlative study of SARC 38, and that's underway. He just got the Outsmarting 2023, one of the Outsmarting 2023 awards to do that correlative study on SARC 38.
Just to follow up on that, and this is how that partnership works. We had enough funds to run the trial. We wanted to know why it worked, why it didn't work. We had a lot of tissue, a lot of samples, and then partnering with MIB, not partnering, but MIB helped, fund the whole correlative study, and it was awarded. So we'll figure out why it worked, why it didn't work, and then potentially do the next study. So again, collaboration, and it had to go through the vetting process to MIB. So we're really excited to maybe learn a little bit more about SARC 38, which was a trial that we were talking about.
Yeah, this is something at the outset with MIB when we started funding research in 2017. This was a concern for us that there was some research happening in osteosarcoma, and we weren't hearing about it. If it failed, and why did it fail? Or if it succeeded, then what? Then what happened? And this follow through is so important, and I think particularly important to an organization like ours, where we run a tight ship, right? Like we do not waste money. When money comes in for research, it goes out for research, and we don't just go, okay, here's some research money, go do your thing. Like I was saying, you can't shake us. We're like we follow that research all the way through, and then we keep following it, and we make sure that we've done right by our donors, and we've done right by the osteosarcoma community. Because for us, much of the money that comes in for research comes in through our family funds. And it's simultaneously a heavy, I'm not going to say the right word is not burden, but this is a heavy thing to carry, because we're carrying the legacy of kids who have suffered with osteosarcoma, and we're carrying the legacy of kids who have survived and those who have passed. And we really take that responsibility very seriously. So we can't take that money that family or that we have raised through like our Golden Bow, and Golden Bow is happening in September. That's one of our major fundraisers that really helps us with research and with all of these programs in the organization. We have a responsibility to that dollar that came in to see it through all the way through, and make sure that we've done right by that dollar, by that family who provided it, by the friend, by the community that provided that money. But most of all, the child who's suffering inspired that dollar to come our way. It is a continuum that we are deeply proud of, because we have followed it through, and we've built. And again, I'm looking at Christina, like with Christina's, oh my gosh, excellent everything that she does. It really has helped us to see that dollar through all the way. So we love that we could take that SARC 38, which is a trial that we believed in, and we're big fans of Dr. Laura Davis, and huge fans of Dr. Mascarenhas too. Holy cow, he's just completely brilliant. Like, to take that and see it through to a next stage, and make the most of the money that SARC has put toward that trial, and the efforts that those PIs have put toward that trial, and really honor that work not for the sake of honoring it, but for the sake of honoring those whom it is intended to honor.
So just a follow up on that is, the word we kind of think about is we're stewards of the resource and in order to be a good steward, you have to, not what we did, it's what the patients did to allow us to have this resource. And we don't want to squander it. And there are many organizations that are young, that have an investigator that has a great idea. But the reality, it's not a great idea because every single idea is a great idea. And you could spend a lot of money. I don't want to say waste a lot of money, but we're stewards. So that's why we really appreciate the rigor for which groups do vet these out and only award high quality research that will allow us to improve things, because we are stewards of the resources that we are all given.
Yeah, I'm gonna add something on this. When I was just finished with treatment, and my doctor is Dr. Myers at Sloan Kettering. He was my pediatric oncologist, though I was 43. I remember there's this day that this was like, oh, this is a moment for me, because I think as a patient, you put your doctor up on a pedestal often, and you also kind of think, they're sort of checking in, they're doing their work, and then they check out, and they, have a different life outside of the institution, et cetera. And so there's this, that was I didn't really see them as like being able to get emotionally attached to patients. I didn't see that until this particular day. So I'm in the waiting room, sitting across from this kid. He does not look good. There's that color, and he was going in to see what his post scans were, and I was going in to see my post scans. I looked different than he did in the sense of I looked like I was recovering, and he did not look like he was recovering. So he went in before me, and so I followed him. He was done. He left. I did not see him leave, and I sitting across from Dr. Myers, and he's looking pretty grim. And I said, "Hey, how's it going?" And I was like, "Oh my gosh, are my scans okay?" And he goes, "Yours look great. They look really good. Congratulations." And I could see he was hurt, like he was hurting. And I said, "Is everything okay? Like beyond that?" And he goes, "You're going to be my good news patient for the day." And I was like, oh, gosh. He said nothing. He violated no anything, but I could see that he was just demoralized by not being able to help this patient and this family. And that moment, though this was not the intention at all, he humanized doctors for me in that moment, where I knew for sure that funding research and finding better was as important for me as it was for my doctor and for many doctors. Because as much as I've been doing this work for 12 years, you've been doing it for 30 years or more, and you have to look in patients' eyes regularly and give them not great news. And in osteosarcoma, that is often more bad news than good news that you're delivering. So that knowing that it matters so greatly to my doctor and to all of the doctors that I know that work on osteosarcoma, it makes me want to work harder, because I know the need is great, not just for the parents and the patient community, but for the doctors and the researchers who are desperate to not have to deliver bad news or to not have the tools to do their best work. So that's my...
I just wanted to actually read a couple of comments that came in from Stephen Young, who's listening in. He's CEO of SARC. So one, I'm just going to read his comments. It says, "I can attest that there isn't a day that goes by that we don't ask ourselves, this is how MIB is addressing this or that. We're inspired and motivated by Anne and the MIB community, including the extraordinary convening of patients, caregivers, clinicians, and researchers, all with a focus on results, but never without remembering those most impacted by osteosarcoma. We aspire for MIB's heart." And also just a clarification for SARC 038, the overall PI is Dr. Faruba Naveed at CHLA. And Dr. Davis is a great partner with Dr. Naveed and Dr. Mascarenas. And then Dr. Naveed and Dr. Asghar, they're actually co-PIs on the correlative study that just got funded for SARC 038.
You say your name 8 more times. Yeah.
Dr. Naveed is a great investigator. She was a great PI of the study. She had a lot of, she's very quiet, but she kind of knew exactly what she wanted, and she did a great, outstanding job. So if you ever have a chance to visit or just chat with Dr. Naveed, definitely take it out. Fariba's a great person. So hopefully she'll have another study that we can then build upon as well. So she's great.
And then I'll remember to say her name then too. So I'll say it 8 more times between the end of this podcast to make up for it. Thanks, Dr. Naveed.
I wanted to kind of touch back on one of the things you mentioned. We were just talking about how, like, on funding this correlative, that it is such kind of this nice kind of collaboration in a way, right? Where we have this one trial and then we continue, because we're big believers in extracting as much value out of everything given our limited resources. So, right, like we don't want anything to go to waste. And so I also just wanted to point out that SARC has a clinical data repository, so that kind of the data and learning coming out of these studies is made available to others. But I did want to also, I'm actually kind of looking right now, and for anyone interested, I put the link in the chat. But for the clinical data repository, it looks like you can access it directly on the SARC trial site. And I'm wondering, and this is because this topic came up at our recent Factor conference, where, I think one of the challenges, it's like the good and the bad, right? The good thing is that there's so many people kind of looking at this, and there are all these different kind of sample sets and then subsequent data sets that are being developed. But especially for rare disease, I think a big challenge is this kind of fragmentation, right? Where we have kind of different studies, but ultimately they don't connect. And so I think kind of one of the questions and challenges that, we're trying to kind of figure out is, like, how do we all don't kind of leverage all this great work kind of people are doing, but how do we kind of make that more powerful by being able to connect that data? And so just kind of curious about how some of this data might connect into others. Like, I know there's I know that this is not just pediatric focus, it's adult and pediatrics, but for example, there's the Pediatric Cancer Data Commons, which has started a bone consortium, and like potentially feeding some of this data into that. But kind of thoughts on how kind of where else this data can go.
Yeah, so thanks for the reminder that it was a foresight of the teams earlier on at SARC that we wanted to keep that clinical data, not only the raw data that we have of patients on clinical trials outcomes, but we also have data on pathology. Some of the studies have pathology digitized. Some of them have actual blood correlative studies. Some also have imaging. So one of the things that we need to continue to do, and scientific AI should help out with this, is that how do we pull the 20-30 studies that we have done, pull out the data, not only the molecular stuff of the original tissue, but also the correlative studies samples. Do we have any samples left over that investigators could use if they want to use, and then, publish on that, because that is the collaborative role. When this clinical CDR, as we would call it, repository was built, it was built on old architecture. So it's very, very cumbersome to go through and say what's available on that. So with the help of Steve Young, our CEO, and other people, we're trying to build out the next generation of this tool that can use for multiple different people in a much more robust and collaborative fashion. We would also say, we've done clinical trials here at SARC, but other groups have done trials as well. How come we're not connecting our data with other organizations? And that's the bridge that I think that Stephen and I will have to start to think through as industry, NCI, other local sites have done. And I think that's where the power becomes, because otherwise you're going to rely on one trial, 3 trials that have a couple of patients with osteogenic sarcoma, when if we pull all of our resources together, and it's not that hard to say, is what data do we have out there? So if you have expertise or have, funding that might be helpful for that broader development of that stuff, please reach out to Stephen Young or us at SARC, or even with you, Christine and Ann, that we can continue the ball moving.
So I want to pivot a little bit to talk about another kind of resource that SARC offers, which I think is a newer program, which is your tumor board, right? So I think SARC just started a monthly tumor board.
Exactly. So, we had this idea several years ago. It says, you know what? Each center has their own tumor board. So we have a weekly tumor board. We have one tonight. We have multidisciplinary. But I kind of can guess what my 4 medical oncology colleagues, I kind of guess what my 4 orthopedic surgeons, I kind of know what everybody can say. Why don't I get other opinions outside of our group that might help our patients? So with the help of Ann has done the same thing through, MIB, and the Desmoid Tumor Research Foundation has done theirs as well. But we thought, let's do a pan one that will have 3 or 4 cases that will get a broad spectrum of cases and get input from surgery, radiation, medical oncology, pathology, and imaging across a spectrum of sites that might have different perspectives. And it's a very rich and robust dialogue and discussion. And we're just pivoting, and Ann has shared ways to get it done a little bit more efficiently. We use some of the tools that they are using with other people as well, and a summary statement. So we're excited about this. We've started, I think, 3 monthly ones. We want to build it out. But Ann, we like to hear kind of how you've done it with your group too, because all of these groups you do yours that are, specific for your tumor type. We're a pan one, and ultimately, if we have an OGS patient come through, how do we start to collaborate and get your team's input? Should we say, no, just go to that one and don't present it at SARC? So those are the learning curve, as we would say. So, Ann?
So I'll tell you, this is collaboration on collaboration on collaboration, because so sort of a side effect that was sort of complicated getting everybody together in one room at our Factor conference, and really, being a connective organization and collaborative organization between all constituents of the disease community. We started to have people who were facing a relapse with their child, and they would go, okay, well, I'm at this one at Factor, and I know this doctor, and I've heard this doctor's really great. And so they would call, and they would get multiple ideas and thoughts about next steps from these different doctors. So my concern is, as I was hearing this, I was like, oh my gosh, these doctors must be getting tired of doing these individual phone consultations. And by the way, they often do it without charging anything, with just out of a lack of time, they're sharing their time. So the idea of a tumor board was appealing to me, that we have one just for osteosarcoma, sort of deinstitutionalized, but bringing all the osteosarcoma experts together, have that multidisciplinary team as sort of a core, but how to do it. And honestly, we did not have the bandwidth to do it. And how do I put this together? So Marlene Portnoy from Desmoid Tumor Foundation, I talked with her, and then we had Christina, who was really excited about this, and actually her husband was super excited about it. And we were at dinner one night, and I was like, gosh, I'd really like to do this. And so that Christina was already working with us on our funding process. So thank you, Jesus. Christina came on board, and she really runs the tumor board and does it with precision and grace that transcends anything that I have ever seen or certainly could accomplish on my own. So Christina, I'm going to turn that, after all that collaboration on collaboration, I'm going to turn that over to you to collaborate on this answer.
Thank you. I do. I mean, a huge thank you to the Desmoid Tumor Research Foundation, because we really kind of took what they were doing, and they were so generous in sharing their best practices with us, which again, in turn, we'd be happy to share with any other organization, because it has been really valuable, both in so many facets, like Ann mentioned, because we have, not only kind of think experts coming together to kind of talk and bounce ideas off each other, but it's also a forum for someone who might not be at a sarcoma center to be able to come and they might, normally not be able to kind of easily access all those opinions in kind of a pretty efficient setting without having to travel or arrange lots of phone calls. And so we've even had international participants. I think we've had clinicians with patients in Australia, in Hong Kong, from the UK. So that's kind of the nice thing, I think, about having a virtual disease-specific tumor board, is that really anyone can participate from anywhere pretty easily. It's like we have clinicians who kind of ask to present a case if they have a challenging case. And sometimes, as I mentioned, we have people in the patient community where, the tumor board is just for doctors, but if they are aware that there's this opportunity to have their case presented, they might kind of nudge their doctor to do that, which in then turn actually creates this wonderful educational forum and conversation to have kind of an interesting case to discuss, which prompts some really kind of interesting topics, like how do you select which TKI to use, which, there isn't a lot of evidence yet on that. So it's always an interesting conversation. And I will say that we tend to be pretty packed with cases sometimes, but we had a recent one where we didn't have as many cases, so we had a little bit more time, and it was just people just kind of prompted just other hey, what are you guys doing about chemo shortage, for example? And it just creates this wonderful forum that people have on a regular basis. And I mentioned how we try to extract as much value from things as possible for the resources and effort that we put into it. So it's important for us that the value doesn't kind of end in that 1 hour meeting, but any kind of learning or discussion can be shared with anyone else who has kind of signed up to be part of tumor board, which is a lot more people than can actually make it, on any given month. So I think that's great too, to be able to kind of share some of those conversations and learnings, outside the meeting, to really kind of extend the value that we get from having all those great brains in one room together for an hour.
You're correct. And if it weren't for Marlene Portnoy, we wouldn't be using the platform OncoLens. So we use the platform OncoLens through ours. And I think you guys probably do too. So they've been a great partner to kind of allow us to do the technology part. And in our tumor board, it's led now by Gina D'Amato. She's a medical oncologist down at Sylvester at the University of Miami. And our team member at SARC is Lindsay Oberman. And those two are really, driving it. And like you said, Christina, it's the conversation around just things, and you just get different perspective, because some centers get honed in on how they do it, but this is a broader way of doing it. And again, the patients benefit. Sometimes we don't have the rights. There is no right. It's more like, how do you do this? How do you do that? Why do you do that? We love to have trial data, which I did find out that there's a way to do a trial search on this thing. But also then kind of basically say is, hey, we're starting to see this pattern. Maybe we need to solve it as a research community. So we're not there yet. We're just learning, and we'll continue to evolve all three of our national, international tumor boards.
Yeah, it's been a really, I want to say, I think even, we've had some jaw osteosarcoma cases come through. And that Dr. Matteo Trico is our fearless moderator and chair, and that kind of prompted him to kind of start a group to work on a consensus paper for jaw osteosarcoma, because there really isn't that much kind of around protocol for that. And I think he's gotten a really great group kind of coming actually just out of those discussions that happen in tumor board, and with participants outside the U.S. as well. So it's been just a nice launching pad for kind of other types of collaboration.
Awesome. This is great.
Yeah. I'm going to add one other thing there. And Christina said this, but I just want to add it in again, that our MIB Agents osteosarcoma tumor board, like I think every tumor board ever, there are no patients that are at the tumor board and no patients attended. This is a physician MD only, sort of an MD PhD only group. I'm going to add one other thing that it does. We just heard back from a patient whose case was presented at at Turbo, which is our tumor board. And she said, oh my gosh, thank you so much. Like this, our doctor who kind of was stuck, came back with a list of things. And we're going down that list from what looks like the best choice for my child. And we now have this longer plan that will see us through. We have so many more options now. And what that translates to is hope. She contacted us and was just like, what do we do? We're basically a local medical center and, haven't seen osteosarcoma in many years and now has access to this hive brain of the experts in the world on osteosarcoma, and they're all helping my child. What better gift to give of your time and your excellence and your knowledge and your own experience than to give this family hope for their child to survive and to have the next step laid out. It is all of the great scientific collaboration stuff, but it also always comes back to the patient and just going, wow, this is just brilliant for my family to know this has been looked at all over the world. It's such a big deal.
Okay, we are already out of time. It's been so fun chatting with you both. It was actually kind of nice it was just nice to just shoot the breeze and not have, slides or anything. So thank you guys both. And for all of you for spending an hour with us today.
Thank you for listening. Be sure to subscribe so you never miss a SARC Talk. To find out more about SARC, please visit our website at sarctrials.org. To suggest a topic or for questions, please email us at sarctalk@sarctrials.org. The SARC Talk series is made possible due to funding from Adi Biosciences. Together, we can find a cure for all forms of sarcoma.